It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilley.
Hi, and welcome to the show. Today, my guest is Lea Anne Paskvalich. Lea Anne is a neurodiversity consultant and the founder of Next Steps Consulting and Next Steps Neurodiversity Resource Fairs. Based in Superior, Colorado, just outside of Boulder, Lea Anne has spent the last 24 years connecting autistic individuals and their families with the education, employment, resources, and relationships they need to thrive, not just survive. Known as a leading resource in neurodiversity support, Lea Anne's extensive experience includes roles such as Executive Director of the Autism Society of Colorado and Director of Admissions and Public Relations at the Temple Grandin School in Boulder. These positions have given her a deep understanding of the unique strengths and challenges within the neurodiverse community. When she's not busy making these connections, you'll likely find Lea Anne hiking the Colorado foothills with her husband and 2 Australian shepherds, tending to her perennial garden, meeting friends for coffee, or planning her next big event. Okay, let's not wait any longer. I'm really excited. Let's jump to this interview with Lea Anne on today's edition of Success is Subjective. Lea Anne, we're finally here. I know we had some tech hiccups, but I'm super glad we were able to make this work. And thank you for carving out some time to be a guest on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited.
Yay. Okay, well, let's just dive right in. I mean, we've had an opportunity to know each other professionally for several years, having both resided in Colorado. But I don't know your full backstory leading up to what it is that you're doing now. So I'm super excited to ask a couple personal questions that are digging into, obviously, the journey of professionally how you got to where you are now. And spoiler alert, what you're doing or what you're shifting to do is going to rock the world. So I'm so excited, but I can't just jump to that just yet. So let's give a little bit of backstory. Where did you actually grow up, and what was the messaging that you were hearing about kind of what you were supposed to do after high school?
Yeah, so I grew up in a suburb of Chicago, Hinsdale. And when I was growing up, really, I think the messaging that I got around my future was, everyone just goes to college. So that was kind of a given. My family had a family business that was, 3 generations in the trucking industry in Chicago. So living in the suburbs, family business in the city, really, there was just no question. You just go to college. I grew up really thinking that I was going to actually be in law enforcement. And so I went to Indiana University, Bloomington, Indiana, as a criminal justice major. So, which I think all things in the end kind of point to that investigative type personality that I have. I want to know everything about everybody. So I headed off to college and went in actually with several credits in foreign language. So I was almost a semester ahead in credits. Was there at IU for 4 years. I would say it was a great chance, like many people talk about, to just get away from home and get away from your parents and kind of navigate things on your own. After college, I returned to Chicago and wasn't exactly quite sure what I was going to do. I had been, through my junior and senior year in college, an intern at the Public Defender's Office in Chicago. And I happened to be an intern in the Murder Task Force. So right along that pathway of criminal justice and just really digging into that, I decided that I wanted to go to law school. One of the things I did not know was that I have ADHD. And so school had always been, difficult times, but I always was able to figure it out. And I think because there was always structure involved, go to high school, structure, go to college. Maybe it took me a little bit longer to figure out. So I started law school after college, and I could not figure it out. There was no one there to put that structure in place for me, and it was completely different than anything I had ever experienced. And I lasted about a semester and a half, and then I'm just like, I cannot do that. So I regrouped, reorganized. At the time, that kind of started my, I guess, kaleidoscope of jobs, I would call it. So I have done so many things. So after law school, I landed in South Padre Island, Texas. My parents had a second home in South Texas, and so I was very familiar with that area growing up. And I'm like, I think I'll just hit the beach for a while and try and figure things out. And at that point, I started working for a real estate office in South Texas on South Padre Island, and got to know a lot about real estate. Once winter hit, that beach life, not as much fun in South Texas. So returned to Chicago and got my real estate license. And I was a realtor in the city of Chicago for a while. That led me to actually back to law. I started working in a law office and kind of dropped the realtor piece again. I have to go back to, I think it was a structure that I needed to put into place as a salesperson and figure it out. So I ended up working in a law office and helping to manage that. And they did real estate closings. So I had the real estate background, I had some of the law background, and ended up managing a small law office in Chicago until I got married. And right after, probably a year after I got married, we had our first kid. And so that really put an end to my work out of the house for a number of years. So had a couple of kids. I have 2 children. And when they were 1 and 2, we left Chicago to move to Colorado for my husband's job. Around that time, one of my kids, my son, was diagnosed on the spectrum. And I have to say that got me organized. That was one of the things that really, I zeroed in and learned everything that I could about autism. And I was really almost like a mobilizer and an organizer, and started support groups and, worked in the school. And so I was really involved in my kids' lives, of course, with my son having, lots of therapy and getting to know the autism community here in the Boulder area. And I helped found the Autism Society of Boulder County in the early 2000s. Kind of jumping forward to my kids in middle school and feeling like, this was a time that I could get back involved outside of the house in, more around autism. So that really, framed all of my work, post kids was really framed around autism. So I went to Children's Hospital Colorado and began volunteering there in the child development unit where they diagnose, and got to know, the staff there. And through that, really realized that I loved working with young children. That led me to a preschool in Boulder where I helped start an inclusive classroom. So that lasted for almost 2.5 years. And that inclusive classroom led me to the Temple Grandin School. So the co-teacher that I was working with, Jen Wilger, is the founder of the Temple Grandin School in Boulder. It still exists today. It is a school for middle and high school students with, I would say, level 1 autism, high functioning autism, Asperger's, There's lots of different vernacular around autism. So I was there for almost 10 years as the director of admissions and outreach and public relations and fundraising, all the outward facing things. So I did about everything except teach over there. And there too, I really was an organizer, bringing support groups together of parents, as well as adults, autistic adults in the community. And just absolutely love that and realize what a need there is for support for autistic adults because, surprise, autistic children grow up to be autistic adults. It's not a childhood condition. So thinking about that and kind of the direction to go and being that organizer and helping people find resources, whether they were at the school or not, we were kind of an ad hoc resource hub for the Boulder community. Learned about a lot of resources from my own experience and the parents that I worked with and being ingrained in the community. I started my own consulting company because I thought that was, an off-ramp from Temple Grandin School when I left there. And that's actually when we met, when I started my consulting and we connected. I went part-time at the school, and then another opportunity arose, as things do. And I applied to be the director of the Autism Society of Colorado, got that job and helped kind of re-energize that organization here in the state of Colorado, again, expanding my resources and my resource knowledge. So I was there for about 3.5 years and left there in 22 to go consulting full time. So I've been consulting now for almost 1.5 years and just loving it, but also recognizing a need for access to information about autism and the resources and support. So that is kind of the direction that I'm heading.
Well, and that's like the perfect tee up to. So first and foremost, what a fun journey to hear. I did not know a lot of your like education and professional and personal kind of journey. And so that was just so cool to kind of picture as you were talking through those transition points, like what you ended up doing, but really like what ended up making something work more for you, right? You were looking for the structure. You were constantly looking for something where you could really kind of breathe more life into an office or an organization. And so I think that that's like, I see you as a mover and a shaker. But now it's perfectly teeing you up to kind of what it is that you just did in Colorado, but also you're looking at potentially expanding nationally. So I'm gonna be done talking. Can you please fill us in on what your next professional chapter is?
Absolutely. So backtracking a minute here, when I was at the Temple Grandin School, I hosted a resource fair. It was out in the parking lot, about 50 different organizations and businesses and providers that support people with neurodiversity. So autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and all the related developmental disabilities to autism. And I loved it, that whole organizational aspect of it. I took that and grew that resource fair when I went to the Autism Society. So entered the Autism Society during COVID. Everything was shut down. Fundraising, very tricky during COVID. Also that outreach aspect in those events. So coming out of COVID, I organized really one of the first in-person events in that summer of 21, where people were kind of coming back out. And it was wildly successful. Just a 1K walk and resource fair. We had over 90 vendors. And what I realized is people really they were just hungry for that in-person connection. They were done, filling out contact forms and waiting for people to call back. And so that where you can make a connection personally and talk to someone face to face from, a clinical office or a rec program that serves that population, that autism population, it was huge. So ran 2 big resource fairs consecutively in 21 and 22 at the Autism Society, and left there to do consulting with that gold mine of knowledge that these resource fairs were something that people really wanted and needed. And not only, the autism, the neurodiversity community, but providers as well really valued that in-person connection with the community, as well as that networking aspect with the providers, because, going to a resource fair, a lot of the providers appreciate it just as much as the attendees. So I set out last summer to organize a resource fair here in Boulder County. And I went big. I secured the Boulder County Fairgrounds, a 40,000 square foot building, and absolutely filled it. We had 88 vendors, all serving across the lifespan. So not just small children, new to diagnosis, but, teens, high school, adults, young adults, all kinds of different supports and resources. And, by January, about 2 weeks before, I had a waiting list for providers because I had filled it. I started to get, quite a few people signing up for information to be on the list. And the feedback that I got day of and post has just been overwhelmingly positive. And I'm like, I think I might be onto something here. So, off we go. I am planning one for Grand Junction in August. I've secured the convention center there, and that registration for vendors will open May 1st. I have January 25 for Boulder, and have the Douglas County Fairgrounds for February in 25. And just, it's been incredible, the amount of feedback that I've gotten about what a valuable resource this is and what a great day it was, an opportunity for connection. And really that's what it's all about, is just connecting.
Yeah. Well, and I think I'm not surprised that you got kind of a resounding positive feedback, because like you said, the vendors want to be providing more information to more people. People are hungry for information. And then it's like the perfect experience, because you've got the person that's leading the charge knows how to curate the experience and keep it organized.
Yeah, I think the organizational aspect, and really, from my work experience and life experience as a parent, as a community member, as an administrator in a school setting, as a nonprofit leader of an autism organization, I have so much to bring to the organization, so many different perspectives and ideas. And I think that's really what made it successful. As well as, there are so many, the focus has been on pediatric autism for a long time. And as we know, kids with autism grow up to be adults with autism. And really, they talk about the cliff. You graduate high school and resources are scarce. And again, those structures aren't in place. And there are wonderful providers out there. It's just getting the word out about them. And on the provider side, as well as the attendee side, those events build trust. Because if you can talk to someone face to face, and it may not be the exact person or clinician that you work with, but if you can talk to someone face to face, that instantly gives you information of, yes, I'd like to look into this more, or maybe this isn't for me and I think I can move on. And then that sharing of information, it's just waves and waves out from there.
So quick question, and we'll make sure that we include all the contact information in the show notes. How do people, whether it's attendees or vendors, find out about getting either registered or knowing when registration goes live?
Yep. And we have a website, nextstepsresourcefair.com is the event website. And by May 1st, we will have everything up and running for Grand Junction, as well as additional information. We're kind of rapidly going into this, so we're behind the scenes working on a refresh of the website to bring it completely up to date by May 1st. I also have my consulting website, so I still do one-on-one consulting with families, with adults, with other family members, even professionals around autism. And so people can reach me there at that nextstepsconsult.com, and happy to talk about that as well. But, really, I feel like I can help 800 people in a day and, 8 people in a month. And so I want to help as many people as I can. And it's about access to information.
I love it. I'm so glad that you're doing this. So final question. Obviously, the podcast itself is called Success is Subjective because the idea is how we picture ourselves one way might be different than how life actually kind of turns out for us. But then with that, it doesn't make you not successful. It just changes the definition or what it is that you're looking for. So kind of a little off script, if you could give yourself advice, like your younger self, knowing what you know today, is there any advice you would give yourself?
I think I would say, hey, really focus on what you enjoy doing and not what you think you should be doing. And playing to your strengths and really kind of tuning into those and using those to build relationships, build strength within your family, as well as within your community and the work that you do. I know I'm a connector, and I figured out a way, I think, to use that strength to bring people together to just help more people. And it just thrills me, honestly, to make those connections. It's amazing.
Well, and that's when it's not work, right? Because it's something that brings you so much joy. So that's when it's like the perfect, like it's perfectly aligned, your strengths with what it is that you're doing. And it kind of goes to that more ethereal piece of like, this is what I was meant to be doing. And I'm so happy for you. I really am.
Thank you. Hope to see you at one of those resource fairs.
I would love to be there. We're going to talk about that offline because I think that's a great idea. I want to support you however I can. Lea Anne, thanks again for taking the time to share a little bit of your story, definitely spotlighting what it is that you're doing now, because not just 2024, but moving into 2025, it sounds like you're really going to provide more education, awareness, and resources and connections, like you said, which is just going to be a pebble in a very large pond that needs to be done.
Most definitely. Thank you so much, Joanna.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guests for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. Put a face with a voice by accessing their interview on the newly formed successissubjective.org website. If you are interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email Joanna at joanna@successissubjective.org. Be sure to check out the collegealternative.org and lilyconsulting.com websites for additional resources outside of podcasting. If you are listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe to the show. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps, such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Last but not least, Success is Subjective is listener-supported, made possible by our team and by you. You can support this podcast by joining the Patreon community at patreon.com/successissubjective. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.
Do you have a teenager or young adult who seems to have lost their way? Maybe they need help navigating adolescence, adulthood, and decisions surrounding higher education. Or maybe they have become withdrawn, their grades are slipping, or they are flat out living a reckless lifestyle, and you're concerned about their health and well-being. If this describes what your teen or young adult is facing, a therapeutic consultant may be able to help. Mental health, addiction recovery, and higher education can all be equally expensive. While information is everywhere, how do you know what option is the best one for your family? Some parents have the time to research and navigate this on their own. Some don't. If the latter applies to you, enter therapeutic consultants. Therapeutic consultants, like Joanna, listen to your family's specific needs and advocate on behalf of your loved one. TCs will research therapeutic resources, recommend treatment programs, and assist during adulthood transitions. Not being affiliated with any program, their support is completely objective and catered toward the best interest of each unique family. To find a qualified therapeutic consultant to work with, check out TCA, also known as the Therapeutic Consulting Association. Their website is therapeuticconsulting.org, all one word. Again, that's therapeuticconsulting.org. Then click the Find a Pro tab up at the top.